Teaching dogs to look to humans, teaching humans how to lead. Welcome to T's Doghouse. Welcome to T's Doghouse. We decided we'd sit down today for a little bit and answer some of the questions that we commonly get asked and talk a little bit about our view of dogs and our life with dogs. So I'm Talmage Smedley. This is my son Tanner Smedley. He usually sits behind the camera and does all the editing, but today he's going to join me up front in front of the camera.
Yep, it's a little bit new, a little bit different being on this side of the camera, but it should be good.
I wish you'd all seen him yesterday, fully bearded. He looks a lot different today with his beard off. He would have been shocked like we all were when he walked out with no beard.
Yep, recent change, we'll see. Awesome. Well, we talked a little bit today about wanting to discuss a few of the ideas of how we think a little bit differently than a lot of the training videos and things on YouTube. Talk a little bit maybe about how we're set up on our online subscription site and how that's different and how those courses are set up and how they work. But we were talking just a second ago, you were talking about really the main way that you feel we're different, and that's in our way of understanding dogs and what dogs are thinking. A lot of times people hear the idea that that I just don't know why my dog does X, Y, or Z, or it just doesn't make any sense, or the dog's so dumb it won't stop doing something, or
stubborn.
Yeah,
it's stubborn
so
a lot.
stubborn. It knows I don't like it and it still does it anyways. You know, those are all things we hear a lot, and it's something that we haven't found to be true ever. There's always a reason why they're doing what they're doing, and so by understanding the reason behind their actions, we can help make the actions that we want more beneficial and help them to behave the way that we envision.
Yeah, I think just like people, dogs make sense. So, I've heard that in a number of situations with people where once you get to really know the person, you understand better why they're doing the things that they're doing. And I think that's the same thing with the dogs. And dogs always make, just like people, dogs always make decisions and choose actions that either help them avoid the things that they don't want or help them gain the things that they do want. And as you break things down and really think about it, that's all of us. Every action any one of us takes is always backed up by one of those two things, which is either a desire to avoid something or a desire to gain something. And I think when we understand that and we can help the dog realize what kind of actions really bring the results that they're hoping for, the things that they're trying to bring into their life, the things that they're trying to get, it's just way more powerful and sticks better with the dog than if we're simply physically teaching the dog to do the things we want it to do. I think one way to say that is, one way is shaping the mind or teaching the dog how to think and how to get what it wants versus just teaching the body and making the dog do the things you want it to do.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a lot of times there's the view of dog training almost being like programming a robot.
Yeah.
I want it to sit when I say sit, and lay down when I say lay down, and be perfect on walks, and the training has kind of been that, where we teach a lot of little basic commands, but it's harder to put together a full comprehensive animal where it's not only obedient in a bunch of different commands, but it knows how to think through situations and understand what you would want out of the situation, how it should behave, rather than just being obedient to commands. And I think I see this a lot with walks and things like that, where a lot of the principles we'll use in training here in the shop, we can then use on walks to help shape the way the dog behaves and thinks on a walk, where it's no longer out to try and find everything in the world and talk to all the other dogs and see all the other people and distracted by the cats and the squirrels and the scents and the smells, but we can help them look to us to understand what the purpose of the walk is, and so that it's not, the distractions aren't distractions, because there's no need to want to go and smell everything and want to chase everything and want to do everything, because what they want is to be with us and to go with us and to and to be a part of what we do. And so I think that's a way that we've really worked on putting together the course to give people tools so that then they're able to take those tools and create and shape behavior. That's why on our website we call the Shaping the Mind course is the first course, where we put all the little Lego pieces, we organize everything, and then we move into shaping behavior, which is where you take all those pieces you've made and you start to build something out of it.
Yeah.
You start to build the dog that you want, where it behaves the way you want in situations without needing to be under command, where it just thinks through what's going on and how all the things you've worked with in the past, and it makes decisions in a way that is beneficial for the situation it's in, and it allows it to be a good part of society rather than just a robot that has to be under command in order to be what we envision it being.
Yeah, and when we're putting together those little building blocks, I think of it a lot as creating a vocabulary and an understanding so that we can communicate with each other, so that we learn to read the dog and the dog learns to read us, and we can actually have a conversation, though it's not just an English conversation, right? It's body language, it's verbal, and it's physical, it's touch, it's the touch of the leash or the touch of the hand. All those things are involved in communicating with the dog. And you find yourself living more than commanding, and dictating and forcing and so I think it creates a much more relaxed and happy way of being with your dog. I think more the way that we all dream of, the way that we saw on Lassie, or years and years ago my dad would tell me about Rin Tin Tin, and these dogs that were almost human. And though dogs aren't human by any stretch of the imagination, so much of what they do, the way they make their decisions and the way they choose their actions is similar. I mean, just very similar. The principles are the same. We'll put it that way. The principles of their learning and their decision making and their leadership, and they're the same as ours. Our way of thinking and communicating is much more complex, but when you think of the principles, they are the same.
Yeah. What are some examples you've seen of kind of going back to that idea of understanding how a dog thinks, but in training, whether in these dogs recently or past dogs you've worked with, where an understanding of why the dog was making the decisions it was making was beneficial, and how that helped unlock the process of overcoming the behavior where before the lack of understanding was what continued it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could come up with a lot of different things. You hear a dog barking outside the door, and that's a dog that's out in the exercise yard, and it just came in a couple days ago, and it's still under the belief that vocalizing to us at the door is a good way to get us to open the door. The dog wants to come in, but it thinks the behaviors it's choosing to try to get us to let it come in are behaviors that we don't like. They make it unpleasant to hear barking and those kind of things. So a dog like that, the trick is taking the time to help it understand what behaviors do lead to it coming in. And sometimes you have to help them understand that a behavior that they are using is not going to get the result they want, that it actually gets a different result, so that they stop using it and they start looking for new ways to communicate. Another great example of that is jumping. Dogs jump because they want our attention, they want our affection. Ever since they were a little puppy, they got their ears rubbed and they got petted, and they got a kind voice, and the touch of a hand was always correlated with the jumping. And so then we think we need to make it so bad for the dog to jump and demand that dog and teach that dog discipline not to jump, which we do want the dog to know that jumping doesn't bring what it's looking for. But how powerful is it to just help the dog understand how to get what it's looking for? If a dog approached you and believed that the way to get you to pet it and love on it and show it affection was to come and to sit and look into your eyes, and then you gave it the affection it was looking for, then you're getting what you want and the dog's getting what it wants, right? Both dreams are coming true. And then you have a dog you love. But if a dog comes up and it wants your attention and affection and all it gets is the opposite, and you just knock it down and yell at it or step on its back toes or knee it, or all these suggestions that I've heard through all the years of how you teach a dog not to jump on you, and then you ignore the dog because you're upset, then pretty soon you just have a dog that doesn't know how to get the attention it's looking for. So nobody's dreams came true. It might have stopped jumping, which seems like the short-term dream, but in effect, you know, the relationship between you and your dog might have been damaged. The dog doesn't know how to get the attention that it wants, and the whole experience was just a negative experience. So when we address those things and we figure out what the dog's dream is and what our dream is, and then we put that together and help the dog understand that behaving the way that we want gets what it wants, it's going to behave that way all the time, because we all behave in a way that we believe is getting what we want, right?
Yeah.
And then that's why we call it shaping the mind, is because it's changed the dog's behavior because we've changed the dog's belief of how it gets what it wants, instead of just telling it not to do what it believes is the very thing it needs to do to get what it wants. So hopefully that makes some sense. But so we could go off on just over and over on all kinds of different things, but the trick is understanding what both parties desire and coming up with a way of being that gives both parties what they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a misunderstanding. I see a lot in a lot of the different forums and groups and things that people, that different dog owners will have and stuff, because it's often viewed that the action is what the dog desires, when in reality, usually the action is an attempt to get what the dog desires. Mm-hmm. So with your example of jumping, the dogs don't really want to jump on you. They want to be interacted with.
Yeah.
And so if you help them, jumping's just the way they've always been taught to believe that interaction is gained. But there's no inherent desire to jump. So by helping show them that they can receive affection by doing something different, by sitting in front of you, then the jumping just goes away, because it was never the point.
Right.
You know, the point wasn't to jump. I see the same thing with pulling, where the people will say, oh, he just loves to pull. And we don't ever see dogs that really just love to,
right.
You know, that constant pressure on the neck, and it can be harmful on their vocal cords and on their throat and cause so many issues. And it's not that they have a desire to pull, it's that they're trying to gain something. So if they can gain that same thing without the uncomfortable pressure on their neck, they're not going to pull anymore.
Right.
You know, so it's a lot of it is shaping their beliefs and shaping their way of acting to show them how to gain what they want. And then the behaviors resolve themselves, because the behaviors were never the desire. The behaviors weren't the point of what.
Right.
It wasn't happening because they love jumping so much. It was happening because they love affection so much.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's an important thing for people to understand.
I love what you said there too earlier about the jumping, that's what they were taught would work to get the affection that they wanted. And it's the same thing with pulling. We teach our dogs to pull, and we teach our dogs to jump. We don't do it consciously, like that's not what we set out to do. But if we have a dog that jumps and we have a dog that pulls, we did teach that behavior. Somehow that dog is interpreted that behavior is going to get what it's looking for. So whether it was a little puppy jumping and we bent down and petted it and picked it up and held it, or wherever that started, where we created that belief, it was the human that validated that dog's belief. When it jumped, the human somehow sent the message that jumping was going to get what it wanted. And it usually, with the jumping, it usually starts as little puppies, because they jump on our legs and we think they're so cute and we pick them up and we love them. And it just starts to ingrain in their mind that that's how we do it. But if a little puppy just learned to sit or stand on all four, and that's when we picked them up, and they never got any attention for the jumping, then they would grow up believing that jumping did them no good. Right? Because like you said, it's not the jumping that they enjoy, it's what they think the jumping brings. And that's the same thing with the pulling. So yeah, it's the same thing with any behavior the dog exhibits. That's why it's hard for people to comprehend a lot and understand, and sometimes is offensive to people when you say it. But the dog is the dog it is because we shaped it that way. You know, if we're the ones that raised the dog, if it grew up in our home, or around us, we shaped whatever dog we have, not consciously. That's why we need to become aware of this communication that's always going on, the physical, the verbal, the visual. because it's going on and it's shaping the dog into the dog that it is. And as soon as we change, the dogs start to reshape and they change too. And so it really all keys on the human. It's all about the human. It's not about a good dog versus a bad dog. It's about good leadership by the humans. It's about good interaction that helps the dog develop a belief system that allows them to gain what they want, but does it in a way that also helps us gain what we want. you know?
Yeah, that's what we were saying earlier with the idea of our training being incorporated into just a way of living rather than a bunch of commands we use, because that's, if you have a year-old dog and you're like, oh, now we need to start training, you're a year and a half behind. Because you have been training the entire time. You're training, you're teaching the dog is learning. There's no pause button while we figure out what we're doing. We're constantly interacting with the dogs. And so the way those interactions are handled is the way they're going to act. And so it's not so much that we need to train the dogs to act certain ways, that we need to train the people to train the dogs to act certain ways, as much as it is bringing awareness to the fact that our interactions are changing the animal.
Yeah.
Because as soon as we're aware of the communication that's taking place without us knowing, or with us knowing,
Right,
as soon as we bring awareness to that communication, we can begin to communicate more effectively and to begin changing things. It's the same way with people.
Yeah.
If you have a friend and you talk all the time, you guys are learning from each other. You're learning what each other likes, doesn't like. And so understanding the ways you communicate with people changes the ways you can interact with them. And when there's things that aren't happening, you need to communicate to help the things happen the way they need to for both people to benefit. And so it's a lot more of an awareness than even a teaching, helping people understand what they're doing without knowing, because so much of the way a dog learns is based on how we handle our space, how our gestures, our energy, there's so many cues that they read off of that we as humans don't use with each other nearly as much because we're so vocal.
Yeah.
And so understanding the communication that's already taking place so we can control it.
Yeah. I'm regularly asked the question of when should we begin training? How old does a puppy need to begin training? And I think, well, you began. the second you got it, you began. So that question really translates in my mind to, when should I become conscious of what I'm teaching my dog? And I think, it'd be best to be conscious of what you're teaching your dog right from the beginning.
As soon as you can.
Because as soon as you touch that puppy, as soon as you meet that puppy, the relationship's begun, the training's begun. So we need to be aware of what it is that we're teaching the puppy. So it's really all a question about our awareness. Yeah. These wonderful flies.
Yep. Yeah. I think we often hear the saying, like, you can't treat them like people. That's another thing I think is funny, because it goes along with this, where a lot of times dogs misbehave because they weren't treated like people. If you treated them more like people, they wouldn't behave the way they behaved. Earlier we were talking about jumping, and that's a great example, because when puppies are little, they're easy to have on your lap. They're so fun to have on your lap, and they fall asleep and you can just cuddle them all day. And when people are little, they're the same way. Babies are held all day long. The little kids love to be held, and so there's that desire to be on someone's lap, to be close with people. But as the kids get older, they're told, you can't sit on my lap anymore. There's a time that me at 6'2" and 190 pounds, I can't sit on my mom's lap anymore. I'm way bigger than she is, and so there comes a time in that growth where you have to start to set boundaries to say, no, you can sit next to me now, but you're too big to sit on my lap. And it doesn't happen the same with dogs, where they grow bigger and bigger, and it's just more and more uncomfortable for us. But a lot of times those boundaries aren't set to say, no, now you can sit here on the couch next to me, or we don't want you on the couch, but you can sit down at our feet and lay there and we'll pet you. And, so it's helping to set those boundaries and treat them in the same way we do treat people. And because we do set boundaries with people, and we have limits to what we're comfortable with.
Yep. And we recognize that we communicate with people. We communicate with people through our body language, and we communicate with people verbally. and we communicate with people through space and through our so we communicate with people, and then with dogs we so often, for some reason, people don't communicate with them. They're just there and they're doing their thing, and people don't realize that they can communicate with them also and set the boundaries just like they do with people. And often when we're in our classes or clinics and things that we do, often the questions are answered with examples in the human life, human to human, because we practice those things, and then we can relate them to how we do that also with the animals, and then it becomes more relatable for people. So that comment that you said where you hear a lot that you can't treat them like humans, I think that's interesting, because I understand where that's coming from. I understand that's that's saying they don't think exactly like us, and that we can't expect them, and we think their emotions are just like our emotions. Yeah, but to me they just are. It's just way more like humans than not like humans. And if we treated, when that comment's made and people say you can't treat the dog like a human, the reality is if we treated humans the same way as that dog is being treated, the humans would have the same problem the dog is having, right? If we didn't create the boundaries with humans, just like we're not creating the boundaries with the dogs, then we would have problems with the humans. And we do have problems with humans in all the same areas, and they come from the same thing: the lack of boundaries, the lack of communication, the lack of leadership, the forcing of things that creates resentment, creates resistance, creates rebellion, so it's just amazing to me that I'm always feeling like if we would just treat humans right and treat the animals right, then things would be better off.
Yeah. What ways of communication are, because we talk a lot, we use the word communication a lot, and I think a lot of times people come into the class and day one, they're like, oh yeah, I communicate with my dog all the time. He listens to me. My dog really understands me and listens to me, and he's just willfully rebelling against what I want him to do. And then by the time they leave their class, they're like, we had no idea what communication even meant. Our definition of communication and your definition of communication, we're not even in the same universe. And that people feel like they're now just trying to scratch the surface of really being able to communicate with their dogs. And so I guess what ways would you define communication, I guess, or help people understand what we mean by that? Not just being able to talk to your dog, but...
Well, I often, when somebody calls me and, for instance, somebody says, hey, I'm having a lot of trouble with my dog. It's a great dog. We love it, and it's very obedient in most ways, but it just jumps all over everybody. And when our guests come over, we can't have it in the house because it jumps all over everybody. And so how do we stop the dog from jumping? And I think, well, what have you done so far? What does your dog say about your desire for jumping? Have you asked your dog why it's jumping? Have you explained to your dog that you don't want it to jump? Have you explained to your dog, asked your dog what it wants, and then explained to your dog what you would like it to do so that it can, so that it can receive what it wants, the reason that it's jumping? And those dialogues have never gone on. Right, the dog, they don't even think about it. The dog just is misbehaving. They want the action to stop, but they're not thinking about the mind of the animal and why it's doing what it's doing. And, that's communication, right? That's reading from the dog and interpreting what it wants and looking at what you want and then explaining to the dog a different way it can get what it wants. And that's communication, that's leadership, that's helping, that's looking at an animal and saying, what is your dream? What is my dream? How do these come together? And how can I help you understand what actions will bring your dream? Because if the dog greets people at the front door in a mannerly way, then a lot of people would like to meet your dog. Not everybody. You still might put your dog up when certain people come over and in certain situations. But if the dog knows how to greet somebody and knows how to be present in those situations and what you expect of it, then both dreams can come true, you know. So so to me, that's communication. That's understanding what the dog wants and having the ability to explain to the dog what you want and how that also benefits the dog, so that their behavior will change.
Yeah, for sure. That being able to work together and not just be two animals living in the same place but separate lives, you know, but being able to live and work together. Yeah, I think a lot of times communication is viewed as the ability to interact with a dog, but a lot of times people don't know how to intentionally. You know, that they do communicate and they do interact with their dogs, but they don't know how to say, okay, well, I know what I want to happen, but I don't know how to help them act in a way that will lead to what we want to have happen. And so I think that intentional ability to interact with a dog in a way that creates change is a part that lacks from a lot of the communication that happens between dogs and owners, where it turns into just a lot of frustration because there really isn't the way to intentionally cause change. There's constant communication happening and constant change happening, but it's not the change that they were looking for. You know, and so really understanding, like you were saying, how the dog's thinking, what the dog wants, what we want, and being able to bridge that gap in a way that creates behaviors that are in line with both, and that intentional ability to create change and to create behaviors and a way of living that is what we're looking for and what the dog's looking for.
Yeah. I remember that just made me think of a dog that I trained. It was a black lab, and I trained her. You knew her really well, Abby. Mm-hmm. And I trained her for duck hunting, and we'd competed a little bit in some hunt tests, and you know, she's a really cool dog. She could do a lot of really, really amazing things. And I decided that I was going to sell her, and so that I could do it again with another dog, as so often happens. And so, you know, I'd found a great buyer for her, and we had gone out duck hunting, and they took me on a fabulous duck hunt. There was 4 of us that day, and then the one dog, and we all shot our limits of ducks, and the dog retrieved every duck from we had a stand out there so it could be up out of the water and was hidden. And from that place, I just stood there at that place, and that dog retrieved every duck that we shot right to me. And there were even times that dog was sitting out in the decoy spread holding a duck in its mouth because I'd asked it to sit because other ducks were coming in. And it just stayed there in the decoys while the other ducks came in. And we shot more ducks, and it would just go to work and you know, clean everything up for us and retrieve all those ducks. And it was a great benefit because then we didn't lose ducks. You know, the ducks that we shot, we were able to take home, and so it was wonderful. And on the drive back in, I asked the other guys that were with me, I said, well, why don't you guys have dogs? And they said, oh, we have dogs. And I said, hunting dogs? And they said, well, they're dogs we bought for hunting. I said, well, why didn't you bring them out? And they said, because they're no fun to have out here because they're so misbehaved. And it just was interesting to me because I knew that their dogs, being bred to be hunting dogs, their dream was to be out in the duck boat with their owners. That was the dog's dream, was to be out there. And that's why it was so excitable when it was out there, is because it loved its job, just like Ebby loved her job. The difference was Ebby knew the things that she understood her job, right? And she performed her job and loved it and performed it fantastically well, and did her whole life. I mean, she retrieved thousands and thousands of ducks. It was a real dream come true life for Ebby, right? Mm-hmm. She spent her whole life doing what she loved. But the reason she got to spend her whole life doing what she loved is she learned how to do it in a way that the humans wanted her and felt like they needed her around, right? Because her dream was fulfilling their dream, and everybody's dreams came together to have great success. So when we talk about communication, I don't think we can do it without also talking about leadership. You know, it was sad to me that those other dogs didn't receive the communication and leadership that could have guided them to have their dreams come true, like Ebby's dream came true, because they had the same dream. And believe it or not, the owners bought the dog with the same dream that the dog had. It just wanted to go retrieve ducks, and the owner just wanted it to go retrieve ducks. The breakdown, the reason that didn't happen for those dogs was because the owners didn't communicate to the dog how to have its dreams come true. You know, and I just think that's ultimately that's the key. That's why we teach them a whole vocabulary. That's why we go through the obstacle course. That's why we create this ability. And then that's why we have to work to understand how can we guide the dog to the actions that we would like to see the dog, and help the dog understand that those actions are going to bring what it wants as well. And that's just good leadership. You know, if we talked about leadership, and there's dictatorship, and then there's great leaders, and great leaders are the ones that help bring everybody together so that their dreams and the goals that the group has can come true. They're just the person that organizes it and helps everybody understand their part and how it's beneficial to the entire group.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember who gave the quote, but I remember we used to talk about the quote a lot when we were younger, that people would lay down their lives for a true leader, and people would lay down their lives trying to remove a dictator.
Right.
You know, talking about leadership, that leadership inspires people to want to work together and to work towards that same dream and that same goal. And that's what we're trying to do with our training, is help the dogs know that their dreams and our dreams are both going to come true if they act in a certain way.
Yeah.
And which is a lot different than the idea that was prevalent a while back, you know, that it all had to be force them into submission, you know.
Yeah.
Because that comes a lot more if it kind of came to just make it believe that the dog doesn't really want what the dog wants. If the dog wants to jump up to get your attention, then just make it believe that your attention's a bad thing.
Right.
And so then it won't jump on you, and that's true, but it's not going to create nearly the same relationship between the dog and the people.
Yeah, I think I see the same pattern in society that I've seen in the dogs. And, you know, if we just talk about it with the dogs, well, and with horses, you know, when I was so involved in the horse industry, we watched the same pattern going on, and it's going on at the same time. You know, the horses, the dogs, the people, I feel like we're all kind of on the same movement as a society. But it used to be that it was a lot of dictatorship. It was a lot of force, and you made it happen, and then they learned that life was better when they did what you were asking them to do than when they were doing the other things, and you just made that happen. And so much of that training was avoidance training, right? If you do the wrong thing, you're going to be in trouble. If you do the right thing, we'll leave you alone. And once in a while, we might even say that you did a good job. You know, we might even give you some kind of reward. And some of the rewards were just built into life anyway. You know, a stock dog wanted to work stock. A bird dog wanted to hunt birds. You know, so there was already, so they just used the force and the avoidance training to stop the bad behaviors, and they allowed the good behaviors to lead to what the dog wanted. And that's how training took place, and it was, you know, it functioned fine. And then somebody decided, you know, that's mean. You know, we don't like to be forced. We shouldn't be forcing these dogs. And so then we had this new movement that was very reward driven. You know, it was about giving them what they want, you know, helping lead them. And a great thing was discovered. You know, largely that's referred to as purely positive training. And we need to be very grateful for the purely positive movement, in my mind, because it really helped us understand the benefits of helping the dreams come true. How much you can do with an animal just simply by guiding it to the rewards, right? And how much you could do without the avoidance training and without any kind of force. But then I think we can also see that then when there's no boundaries and it's just all sugar and candy, then they get spoiled rotten, and then you have other problems. And sometimes some behaviors, they do need to learn that those behaviors aren't tolerated. We can't tolerate biting somebody. We can't tolerate, you know, there's behaviors that lead to euthanization. Or being euthanized. There's behaviors that lead to being rehomed. There's behaviors that lead, and these aren't positive things in the dog's life. And so we do need to be able to tell a dog, not that behavior. We don't want that behavior, and have the dog avoid that behavior. But the power is in helping the dog understand the behaviors that do lead to what it wants, so that it builds that desire.
We had dog barking in the background, so we had to cut out a little bit there, but we were talking about the idea of we kind of got into it talking about the idea of dictatorship versus leadership. And when I was younger, my dad talked a lot about, I don't remember who the quote was by, but it was essentially that people would lay down their lives to defend a true leader, and people would lay down their lives to try and remove a dictator from power. And that difference in leadership being helping everyone to know that they can and should work towards a common goal, and being able to communicate that clearly, and dictatorship being that force that they have to do it whether they want to or not. And
whether they see the benefit or not, whether it is beneficial or not.
Yeah. And so that's a thing that's important, is we're training to be able to help the dog see how their dreams can come true and our dreams can come true. We used the example of jumping earlier to illustrate how dogs want the affection, and so then therefore they'll jump. And so helping them understand how to gain what they want a different way, and then that jumping isn't okay. It's really easy to get them to not even want to jump, because that was never their desire. But if the approach is, well, you want my affection, so I'll just make it very uncomfortable to have my attention, and then they'll stop trying to have your attention, and they'll stop jumping, but that's not going to create a very good relationship between you and the dog if it believes that your attention is a bad thing. And so the difference between those two ideas.
Yeah, because you just talked about two different things. One was the dog's desires, what it wanted to gain, which was your affection, and the other was what the dog wanted to avoid, which is punishment, right? Yeah. And so it used to be viewed that we would just use the avoidance training, just make it uncomfortable for them when they jump, just punish them for jumping until they don't jump anymore. And but we're missing out on what the dog really wants. And so the dog is still going to try to figure out how to get what it wants. It might stop jumping on you because it doesn't want you to knee it, or it doesn't want you to step on its toes. But the next person that's going to give it affection, then it's going to jump on them, because it still knows in its mind jumping is still going to bring affection, and so you drive it off, or you subdue that behavior in certain circumstances, but the behavior is going to show up again later. Versus when you address the dream and say, this dog wants my affection, I'm going to teach it a different way to earn the affection. That's going to translate, and that dog's going to say, the best way to earn the affection is through these actions, and everybody I want affection from, I'm going to try these actions, right? And so that's shaping the behavior, and we're doing it on the gain mindset, right? We're doing it because we're showing the dog how to gain what it wants to gain.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because we use those terms a lot, gain mindset and avoidance mindset, and so just a little bit about what those are, what you mean by those two ways of talking about a dog's mindset.
So we also use with that, for us, the way we talk about it, that's where we use negative and positive. And negative and positive can become very confusing for people in the dog world, especially entering the dog world, because it's used in a lot of different ways. But when we refer to positive pressure, that's the internal drive or desire to gain something, right? I have a pressure inside of me to make $1. So therefore, I'm going to do the actions that I believe are going to make $1. I have a desire in me to drink some water. Therefore, I'm going to choose actions that's going to get me the chance to drink some water. That's a gain. There's also negative pressures, and they can be for the same action. I might have a desire to avoid being thirsty. Therefore, I'm going to pack a water bottle with me. And that was in an effort to avoid being thirsty. So that's a negative pressure, an avoidance pressure. But in my mind, when we are working and thinking in the gain as humans, that's a happier place to be than when we're always working trying to figure out how to avoid the things that we don't want. A dream come true mindset is What do I need to do to attain what I want to attain? And so, that gain mindset versus the avoidance mindset is what we refer to a lot in the dog training, and how do we shift that dog into a gain mindset and get it to act in ways to gain what it wants rather than act in ways to avoid what it doesn't want. And in the dog world, we'd also start talking about avoidance training versus purely positive training. And it's so interesting to me because we've divided it as if it's two different things. It's two worlds that even fight against each other, and they don't realize that both of them are present at all times in the dog's mind. Just like in humans, the dog is always working under an idea of avoiding some things and doing some things to gain things, right? Every day, all the time, the dog is making decisions, and it avoids some things and it works to gain some things. That's just how it works. So to me, it's a little bit like playing basketball, and do you use your left hand? And a child's using his right hand all the time, and all of a sudden it's realizing that the defender is shutting it down easily because it can only use its right hand. So it starts using its left hand, and then it realizes, that opens up a whole door. But you're not better off just using your right hand than you are just using your left hand, or vice versa. You're only half there. Yeah. But if you have the ability to use both hands according to the situation and what the situation dictates, now the sky's the limit is what you can do. And that's how I feel about the gain mindset versus the avoidance mindset, the positive pressure and the negative pressure. The purely positive versus avoidance training. Those things it's all training, and the dog is thinking about those things all the time. It is impossible to put a dog in a purely positive state of life. It's just not even possible. Mm-hmm. They're going to make some decisions in an effort to avoid some things. That's just how it is. And so when we understand that, then we can work under the understanding that the positive, the dreams come true, the gain mindset is where the greatest power is. We have to be grateful for the purely positive world or movement, because we have learned so much about the power of the reward, the power of that gain mindset. But that doesn't change the fact that there is also power in the avoidance mindset. I would say it definitely has shifted and helped us understand that we don't need nearly as much of the avoidance as we think, because the dog, just like the human, once they figure out how to make their dreams come true, that's what it's all about, right? Yeah. That's what it's all about. They focus on, that's what their energy's put towards, so then it just takes little touches here and there, almost more of just a guidance to say, you don't want to do that. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
You know what works. Go do what works, and don't worry about these things that don't work.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of that idea. We talk about it as theory in our courses, as kind of the theory section where we sit down. We talk about dog theory, how dogs think and understand, and we talk a lot about spectrums and continuums. And, how thinking of things almost as a scale rather than as two opposite things. And I think it's interesting because that understanding, you see that with people too, where the deepest and strongest relationships are people who have gone through bad and good times together.
Right.
People who have only gone through bad times together and there's never been a good time typically don't like each other. Yeah. And people who have only ever experienced good times don't have nearly the depth of people who have experienced hard things, and so that we see that in life where good and bad are needed together to create a full picture. And I think that it's great that we're seeing that so much more in training and things, where an understanding of both allows us to be able to create a really comprehensive and deep relationship with our dogs, where we are able to really communicate on a level that the typical relationship with the dog wouldn't, if you're able to understand the full continuum, the full spectrum of that idea of the avoidance versus gain and some of those things we talk about in the courses.
Yeah, I think those are some great points. I think that, and being in that gain mindset is such a wonderful place to be for humans and for dogs, when you feel like, hey, this is working, like our dreams are coming true. Yeah. invigorates you and gets you to be interactive with your animals even more, because you're recognizing, hey, this is going somewhere. This is amazing. I never knew I'd have an animal like this, you know. And that's the things that we see happen when people go through our courses and when they interact and get involved in what we're doing. And that's what we see happen in our own lives. That's why we stay involved and spend so much of our time in this, is that the new places that you get to go with your animal, they're never ending. You know, the depth and the experiences that you can have are really, really cool. And it's an amazing thing for me. Growing up with me, you know, we've had a lot of dogs come in and out the door. and the reason for that is because I loved the process of building those relationships and creating the behaviors, but I loved it so much that when I got to a certain place, I wanted to go through it again because I thought I could do it even better. And then I thought I could do it even better. So I was never satisfied with, you know, raising. I mean, sometimes I'd raise a whole litter of puppies for a whole year, right? And then at the end of the year, I'd be like, that is so cool. I'm so excited about where I got. I need to find homes for all of them so I can try it again and do it even better. You know, and I have new ideas that I want to try to use, you know, with these next puppies. And so a unique thing to me is that I've trained hundreds and hundreds of my own dogs. You know, I owned them. I was their successes were my success, you know. And so so it's just, but that's where I've learned. That's why I'm grateful to each one of those animals, because I learned something new, you know, with each one of them, and I improved my ability to communicate with each one of them, and a few of them, you know, the relationship stuck enough that I just couldn't sell them, and so we have a few dogs, but to have owned hundreds and hundreds of dogs over the years and only have had 3 or 4 that died of old age, you know, in our home is a pretty unusual thing. To some people, they might not think that's a positive thing at all, and I'm glad I'm getting to points in training where more often I find that they're animals that I don't want to get rid of, you know, because I'm really, really happy with the relationship and what we have going on, but I am grateful for the mindset that I had that allowed me to do so much discovering and learning. And I have a lot of, I mean, those dogs went to great homes where they lived great lives, you know.
Sorry.
So, you know, but it was, you know, but that's how I learned is just over and over and over with dogs that got to stay as long as I wanted to keep working, and it was just, it's been a great learning process, but now it's an awesome thing to learn how to help other people see that and go experience the same things that I've experienced.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing because you got hooked on the process, you know. In all kinds of different disciplines, you see that, where there's a lot of people that get hooked on the result and they become great at something as a result. There's some people who get hooked to the process and to refining the process, and it really propels industries forward. And that's, looking back now where we're at, we've been able to create these courses online to now be able to help share this, but it's sharing the process that took hundreds of dogs to refine. You know, that it unlocked even though as a kid it was just constant, new dogs came through all the time, you know, and there was that constant turnover and development, and then sold and developed some more, and that constant turnover, but it's allowed us to really create the process where now we can help people step by step replicate what we've done, because we've done it with hundreds of dogs, and we've helped other people to do it with hundreds of dogs, and so it's become a very refined thing. And so I think that in the end it's a great thing, and that we too are refining and becoming better and getting better at it all the time.
I think where I fell in love with the process of helping others was the saving of lives, you know. And I think the first dog that I really truly realized that I'd saved a life was our dog Duke. And you know, he was 9 months old, he was already human aggressive, and he was other dog aggressive, and way out of control, and very strong and incredibly athletic, and you know, everything about him was headed in a bad direction. You know, he wasn't a dog that was going to get to survive a long time. because he just wasn't safe. And so being in a situation to take that kind of a dog on, and then seeing the change, and now he's such a phenomenal part of the family, and he meets everybody, and he meets all the other animals, and he's one of the dogs that I always lean on when I get a dog in with aggression cases, because I know that he's going to perform and act in the energy that I need him to be in. He's just an amazing animal that way. And so to realize that underneath all those behaviors that he was using because he believed it's what was keeping him safe and was keeping his world the way he wanted it, when we changed those beliefs and those belief systems, he was like a totally different dog, and such a happy and fun-loving and affectionate and kind and just a wonderful animal in every aspect, with the little puppies, with the cat, with babies, with it just doesn't matter. He's just such a wonderful animal, and that was life-changing to realize that you could save a life. But then when I've helped other people go down that same journey with other dogs that were displaying actions, that were doing things that were going to lead to a short life, it was really satisfying. And then I think that's when I started to recognize that it was the same thing with the bird dogs and with the pets, that it didn't need to be dogs that were in extreme problems, but this process that I'd grown to love, that had brought me so many wonderful relationships with my dogs and so many amazing experiences with my dogs, could be handed on, and I could see other people have those same kinds of experiences with their dogs, and that became very rewarding and very creating a drive in me to be able to make the videos with you and create the website and to move in this journey where we want to open the doors to just help people have the success that we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's been an awesome discussion. I think it's been really good. We're going to do a lot more of these as we go forward. And already just in this one, I've had more ideas for future videos and things like this, because I think it helps to really help people understand how we think, and the thinking behind our training is what's different about our training. And so I think that it's a great thing. So we'll keep doing these and keep moving forward with that. And so check us out, teasdoghouse.com. See a lot more of what kind of some of the things we referenced today was all building off of what we talk about on there and what we teach in those courses. And so it helps dogs, it helps people, it changes lives.
Helps make dreams come true for the animals and the people.
Yep. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.